if we have a healthier view around time and understand that margin doesn't magically happen, we create margin and that we prioritize, we start to see that we can make progress in all of these areas and still get the work done.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup. And today I'm really excited for our guest. How are you doing today, Dr. Autumn?
I'm doing fantastic, actually. Thank you for asking.
So I'm really excited to dive into today's topic because we're really focusing in on burnout. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a loaded question. I'm a passionate person, so it's not an easy answer. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of two boys. I am a very engaged in neighbor. Aside from my work, I spend a lot of time making sure that me and my kids are leaving margin in our lives to be engaged and active community members. I think it really contributes to our quality of life. I spend a lot of time making sure I prioritize my health and wellness in the midst of a lot of work. So I'm an entrepreneur, primarily a coach in the space of holistic health and leadership development. I also went in the nooks and crannies, like I'm out marketing, promoting my book, The Playground Leader, because I will always have a place in my heart for young people, for youth, and wanting to elevate their voice and impact our young people because I started out in community development working with youth and families, and that was a really formidable years for me. It made a huge impact on just like my paradigm and how I see the world and how I want to have an impact. And I think working with people and helping them thrive as leaders is one way, but I think I'll always be connected and have a passion for our young people in this world.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm the same way. I love helping out the youth and helping out young people. And I think it's important that if we teach these skills earlier on, then we don't have as many people facing burnout later on.
Mm,
But diving
yes.
more deeply into burnout,
Mhm.
why is it that so many people, so many leaders, and whether that's a leader as an entrepreneur or a leader as your family household, why do we face burnout?
Mm. That is such a good question. And actually, like, what inspired me to do my dissertation research for my doctorate degree was in large part because when I was in community development, and I also was doing some health coaching as well. So I understood the importance of taking care of ourselves physically. And faith was always really important to me. So I understood the spiritual formation aspect. But there was like this disconnect because I was working with community leaders and partnering with whether it was people in public schools or other nonprofit leaders. And there was a common denominator of this passion for their work, and they were doing good things and working for good causes, but chronically tired and overwhelmed and stressed, and people did not know how to cope with stress. I will tell you, I don't think life is about avoiding stress, and I'll talk about this more later and how you can prevent burnout, but we are going to experience stress, so it's not about avoiding it, it's about learning how to cope with it well, and that's a skill. And just a lot of but yeah, so just being in that space working with leaders and seeing that there was this constant gap in people's lives from where they were to where they wanted to be. And it didn't matter how many times they were like, I need to do better. I'm not well. I want to be healthier. This is the year. Or going to a conference, getting inspired, say, I'm going to do something differently. And then people wouldn't do something differently. Okay. So, to your question, like, why are people facing burnout? I think a lot of it is just not pausing long enough to actually give yourself space to create a plan for change, right? Because nothing's going to change if you don't change something. All right. So these leaders are out doing good work and changing things in their workplace, but we're not looking internally and saying, okay, like I need to start prioritizing my own wellness because if I don't, then my own fulfillment and capacity is going to go down. I'm not setting an example for those I have influence over. And yeah, I think sometimes it just takes a catalyst and then knowing what to do. So my approach becomes very practical. It's not just motivating people to do the thing, is say, okay, if you have a gap between intention and implementation, what do you actually need to do to start bridging that gap?
Ooh, but how do you really get someone to really see and acknowledge that? Because a lot of times we have our coping mechanisms for a reason, but
Mhm.
we don't know how to integrate new coping mechanisms, but mostly because we don't know that there are other ones. So how do you help people to bridge that gap and say, "Hey, what you're doing isn't really working. Let's try
Mhm.
something a little bit different." Also without upsetting them.
Yeah, no, that's so good, and the reality is, like, you can't make somebody want to change. So I find, like, that, like, magical place is when people hit a moment where they're like just tired of being tired. You have to want to do something about your situation. But sometimes people get to that point where, okay, I'm ready for a change, but they don't make the change because 'cause they're not sure what to do. Okay, and I can't necessarily it is a mindset, so I don't have a magic answer for what's gonna take somebody from just the hamster wheel of doing the same thing over and over to all of a sudden one day be like, "I'm ready to make all these changes." But I do think if you catch somebody who's, "Okay, I want to do this enough," there are a few really helpful things that could bridge that gap. One is accountability. I believe strongly in community. You catch yourself in a moment of motivation, call somebody and say, "Hey, let's do this together because I'm just tired of being tired." So I believe so strongly in the power of community and accountability. And that's why, like, even with my membership platform, I call it a community because that is like super, super important. And all of us know at least one person we could call and say, "Hey, I really want to do this. Can you support me?" I think the second thing is just honesty and self-awareness because it's really easy to just justify things and make excuses. And I think at some point people get tired of that, right? Like a lot of these folks are successful at doing things for a reason. They've gotten to a point in their lives because they haven't made excuses. So they found success in some areas. So then it's just translating some of that to success in your own life, in your pursuit of wholeness and what the catalyst for that could be to cause you to have that really honest conversation with yourself and more self-awareness, that varies from person to person. It could be you become a parent, you're like, or a grandparent, or you have a loved one that passes away, unfortunately, prematurely, or that you just hit a moment of, I actually know personally some friends who just hit a moment of such high stress and anxiety that it negatively impacted them so much that it almost forced change. Okay, and but we don't want people to wait until they're in such a bad place. They're like, "Holy smokes, like, I really need to do something." And so, I think in advance, bigger picture, 30,000-foot view is starting to change the narrative around health and self-care. It's not a selfish thing. You're actually investing in your own leadership development by doing these things. You're gonna be a better parent, a better teammate, a better leader when you do this, but there's just a narrative around, like, work, suck down caffeine to get enough energy to keep working, and then if I have any margin left over. So the narrative I'm trying to shift to say, we need to create margin for our self-care first and then fit everything else in after that.
How do you do that, though? How do you change the narrative of mental health and self-care without saying that everything that you're doing is wrong? And without saying that everything that we did in the past was wrong, but recognizing the fact that as a whole, it doesn't seem to be working for most people. But how do you make
Mhm.
that change from a national perspective and then probably globally as well?
Hmm. That's a complex question because whenever you there's so many layers to this answer, right? If you're looking at an individual, some of it comes from just I'll get to the societal part of your question in a sec, but at an individual level, some of it is just helping people realize that what they don't want to experience anymore. If you are we have the narrative that I just shared as an example, but overworking and lack of energy on an individual level, a lot of it is just recognizing I'm just tired of being tired. My I'm constantly under stress, so I'm tired of living out of lack. I want to live out of abundance. Like sometimes it's just helping people realize clear enough like how they want to live. And then it's an invitation to say, okay, we're going to start changing the narrative around these things. Like, for example, a common narrative people like to eat. We're all foodies. Like I eat really healthy, but I'm still a foodie. And so it's a false narrative that if you like food, you just have to be unhealthy because you could make flavors, you can make things taste so good and you could do it quickly. Because I usually have to prepare a healthy meal for me and my kids in 30 minutes or less, and I want it to taste good. Okay. So again, we start changing the narrative around how we view food. So that's on an individual level. Again, there's that initial catalyst, and then it's an invitation. Okay, let's start working through some of these things. On a societal level, like culturally, though, that's a lot more challenging. I think I don't particularly have the answer for that because I am working with folks who are like, I'm recognizing that I need to do something differently. But I do think change is coming in that way a little bit because people are starting to see the integrative nature. There's more conversations. There's been some brilliant books written just about the integrative nature of how we live our lives because traditionally we compartmentalize everything, right? Like our spiritual wellness here, our physical health here, emotional health here, mental health here. There's so many really amazing conversations happening now that we need to look at the whole person. And that's going to start to change the narrative, even with young people in education. Okay. There's more mindfulness being incorporated into our schools, not at the ideal level, but I feel like once we understand that we cannot compartmentalize our lives anymore, it just doesn't work. As a matter of fact, my entire research and dissertation argument was that it's a failed effort to try to improve in one area without acknowledging all of them because they are linked. Like you just can't do it. Now you might for a time say, okay, I only have the bandwidth to focus on this one goal, but in your mind, you have a mindset that all of these things are connected, so you're not going to ignore any of them. And so I think because of that, like even just with the rise in the conversations around gut health and mental health, right? Like people, it's not weird to talk about gut health. Now people are curious about it and knowing that okay, your gut health is impacting other areas of your lives, including your mental health, right? Because so much of our serotonin levels are is connected to how healthy your gut is. And so that's my hope is that because of that, the narrative might begin to shift a little bit.
Wow, I love that. So one thing that you touched on, I think a lot of people touch on this as well, is the narrative behind lack and abundance.
Mm.
Can we dive a little bit more deeply into what that mentality of lack is and then how we shift to abundance? What is abundance?
Okay. Okay. This I'll answer this two different ways because I feel like what is lack? So I could answer that in one way, in that if you're pursuing wholeness, and that's abundance, right? If abundance is wholeness, it's a living an aligned life, it's feeling like you're making strides in all these spaces. Now we're human, nobody's perfect. That's not the point. The point is that you're embracing this growth journey, not making excuses, not having a fixed mindset, but acknowledging I'm going to create space. I'm going to make a margin in my life. Um, I'm going to prioritize margin in order to pursue wholeness. Okay. That's a very abundant way of thinking because I feel like there's probably multiple things we could point out, but time becomes a pain point for people. If you were to think about, if I was thinking about one of the big excuses that I come across is time. Time's just a pain point for people. We all have a limited amount of time, not enough time to hit our business goals, not enough time to do the things we want, not enough time to work out and I feel even healthy relationships, right? Like we're meant to be in relationship with one another and that takes time. So if you're always having a negative view of time, then you're going to feel hopeless. You're going to feel like I just am never going to have enough time to do these things. So like why even try and just settle for where you're at? I think if we have a healthier view around time, and understand that margin doesn't magically happen. We create margin and then we prioritize. We start to see that we can make progress in all of these areas and still get the work done. Like maybe not on the exact same timeline, but you'll be more fulfilled and your capacity will increase because 10 hours out of a place of abundance and health is a lot more productive than 10 hours out of lack and stress. Because let me tell you something super fascinating is there's so many things that impact our brains and our ability to think clearly and be creative and innovative. And if you're eating too many processed foods and you have unhealthy thought patterns, like time, why are you even talking about time? Because you're not going to be as productive with that time. Let's talk about health. And then you'll be amazed at what you can get done in half the time, right? Just in how you'll be able to function. Even I've had community leaders talk about their spiritual clarity, their mental health, their emotional regulation, their relationships, their wisdom, like all these things increasing when they made time for themselves, okay?
So you talked a lot about gut health, eating healthy. We also talked about stress, cortisol levels. So
Mhm.
earlier on, we were talking about coping mechanisms with stress.
Mm,
A lot of
mhm,
people's coping mechanisms are either to eat more or eat less.
mm.
What do you say about that? What do you say about somebody with their stress levels and what they can do about their coping mechanisms?
Yes, like such a good question. Something I'm super passionate about because, like I said, I would say in my early 20s when I was like all gung ho about this and go change the world and like challenge the way systemically we look at our solutions. And I didn't have kids yet, so I had time to do all the things and work and all these things. And then life happens and life is always lifing. And then I hit some of the most stressful, challenging seasons of my life and I had to live what I preach. And so, in the midst of not feeling like doing things, I forced myself to do the things because I knew that if I just succumbed to how I was feeling and I acted accordingly, it was not going to support my goals and it was not going to end up well. And so sometimes it's like playing a game with yourself. It's knowing, okay, I have a plan and I'm going to stick to it, even if I don't feel like doing it. But it's almost why it's most important to build a foundation now when you're feeling good so that when you do hit a curveball in life, that you could sustain what you're doing, even if you're feeling melancholy or grieving about something or angry about something. And so I think that's a super important if you can now to start building that foundation. But to your question, if you're already in a space where you know that you're not coping in a healthy way, I would say start with baby steps. Don't feel like you have to change everything overnight or you'll just feel even more stressed. But it's having self awareness about maybe, okay, I'm coping with this one area in not so healthy of a way. So just exchange it for something else. Like it's almost I find that people are most successful when they feel like they're trading in one for the other, right? As opposed to just, okay, I'm wiping out all my habits and now I'm just going to do all these things. You're setting yourself up for success if you try or failure if you try to do that. But if you feel like, okay, like I'm acknowledging that the way maybe I'm coping with stress right now, this one habit I have probably has got to go. So let me exchange it for something that's healthier. And then again, it's always good to bring in an accountability partner. Of course, I have all my opinions and my thoughts on like how to cope well with stress, like things that you could start doing now. Let's say, even if you're like, you have certain habits. If you start integrating healthy habits on top of the bad habits, you might start to see also some of the bad habits go away because you're regulating yourself better. If you just start deep breathing, it engages your vagus nerve, which is incredible. If you haven't started to learn about the vagus nerve, it's like this incredible way that our bodies have been created to like self-regulate and bring some inner calm. So when you start doing those things, then you can regulate your emotions better. Do some simple rewiring of thought patterns, like telling yourself something over and over that's countering maybe a lie that you're believing. You start doing some of those things and you'll be slowly building yourself up so that maybe you'll have more motivation or energy to get rid of some of the bad coping mechanisms. As you could tell, there's not a cookie cutter way to go about this.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I've had a couple people dive into the vagus nerve, so I feel like we should just talk about it. So,
Mhm.
let's talk about the vagus nerve, what it is, and how it helps us to regulate our bodies, keeps us in homeostasis, and also the negative effects of our diet. When people have
Mm.
diets and things, and how that also affects the vagus nerve.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I could talk about nutrition all day long. I am on this learning journey of understanding our thought patterns in the brain and emotions to an even greater extent. I definitely know more than the average person, but there's experts out there that know a lot more than me. So I could talk a lot more about how food impacts us, but I will touch briefly on the vagus nerve and the not the full extent of my understanding, but probably the most helpful things for people to know. So this nerve that runs from your brain to your gut, right? There's a reason if you don't believe that everything's integrated, just imagine how your emotions, and I talk about this on one of my podcast episodes too, just more in depth. But if your emotions are actually integrated with every level of your being down to the cellular level, right? There's a reason you might lose your appetite if you get a little nervous or you're sad about something, right? Everything's so integrated. And so, what's really fascinating about the vagus nerve and what they call vagal tone, when you focus on becoming healthier in this way, it improves your vagal tone, which is interesting to me because, like, we work out to get more tone, is like your nerves, you're trying to make your nerves more toned. It's just interesting way to look at it for me. But so deep breathing is huge. Like it's almost become so common to talk about that people are like, yeah, whatever. But when I was going through one of the most stressful times of my life, my holistic doctor, like I was eating, I was exercising, I was praying, I was doing all the things but breathing. Okay. And she said, this is the missing piece. This is essential. It's not optional. Like some of these other things, optional. This is not optional because what it's doing is it's taking your body maybe from a state of fight or flight, which fight or flight is not just like getting spooked about something. We don't even understand how often our bodies are under stress and in fight or flight mode and cortisol levels are spiking. And so you might have gotten so used to it that you didn't even know your body's in that state. And so all of us could benefit from taking time to do deep breathing. And just for sake of time, I won't go into different deep breathing exercises, but literally you could Google it and they're everywhere. There's so many options. So what that's doing is actually stimulating your vagus nerve, bringing your body to a greater sense of inner calm or peace. And it would physiologically your body's responding. Because if I do something in my thoughts or my spirit, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I feel at peace spiritually or mentally, but my body is still in fight or flight because something I just went through. Like breathing will then bring my body back into alignment of feeling calm. Right. And so that's what I realized because I might not feel like I'm stressed because I'm an optimist. And then I'm like, "Oh, no, your body is, like, not happy right now." And so that's what deep breathing will do for for vagal tone. There's lots of other things, being in nature. Go for a nature walk, be outside, take a break right after you eat. It's amazing balancing your blood sugar. Eat, go for a quick walk, be outside in nature. Also, I haven't studied this as in depth, but I want to learn more about how singing impacts vagal tone. Like, I cannot sing, but if I'm by myself chopping vegetables to eat healthy in my kitchen, I'm listening to music and singing, I'm actually improving my vagal tone. It's so fascinating, just all the things that we could do to support our managing stress basically, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're moving our body more into or engaging our parasympathetic nervous system to a greater level. As far as food, for sake of time, I can keep this super brief, but I am very passionate about nutrition. Our bodies need the good stuff. Okay. We know that. What I'm going to bring awareness around is the fact that on a societal level, the statistics are alarming and scary just how many toxins we're taking in because of the rise of eating processed food, eating not non-organic. Just there's so much we're eating way too many refined sugars and processed oils like the bad kind, right? There are a few kinds of good oils: avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil. Outside of that, avoid them. But basically, like, we're consuming so many toxins that our bodies were never meant to be exposed to that level of toxins, and there's almost no greater thing you can do than take the time to eat well because your body's gonna function at such a higher level when we're taking care of it, okay? Instead of just constantly, like, fighting, and then we get a health scare because some organ is functioning funny, and it's not because it's not, "Oh my gosh, like, what happened to that organ?" It's like your body's just been taking on too many toxins for too long, and we have to look at all of these issues from a holistic perspective, understanding our body works as a system. So I didn't specifically answer your question on how we eat impacts vagal tone specifically, but in general, if we could reduce the inflammation levels in our body by eating well, if we could improve our gut health, which is connected to our vagus nerve by getting probiotics and high quality soluble fiber and so on and so forth, it all will have a positive effect because it's all connected.
Wow, I love that, and I think you did a great job explaining it, honestly, and the one
Okay.
thing about the vagus nerve that I think would be helpful for people to know, and this is also why singing is beneficial, is the vagus nerve, for those who don't know, is located and then your voice box is obviously right here. When you start to sing, you're actually vibrating, the vagal nerve is right, next to it. This is why different audible tones are able to have various effects on the body, and
Mhm.
when you take deep breaths, when you're allowing your blood vessels to open up and to have more oxygen, it actually allows for that flow to go a little better. My degree is actually in biochemistry.
I'm pretty sure you know about the physiological side, don't you?
Yeah, I
Have
had
you
heard.
heard about the physiological side?
Yes, 100%. Actually, I've been working in the medical field for almost 15 years now.
Okay. Okay.
But that is all the time we have for today, Dr. Autumn. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience before we go?
I just want to say if you're feeling a little bit stuck, like you know that you want to change, but you're not sure where to go, just find a space where you're doing something with people. That's why I created the Align Living community. That's why I think podcast platforms are even fantastic because you're listening, but you know that you're listening with and amongst community. And so that's one of my biggest words of encouragement is just do something about it, take a baby step and bring other people into the journey with you if possible, because that is really like one of the biggest factors to success. That and understanding that margin is not just going to appear. You have to create margin for things that matter. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. If people want to follow me as well, like I'm pretty active on my IG. I'm always posting like different tips and ideas on there on Instagram at Dr. Autumn Swain. And then my website has a link to my podcast, my membership community, my book. It all could be found at autumnswain.com, and people could reach out to me directly that way too.
Awesome, I love that. Thank you, Dr. Otto, for coming on, and thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Plain Soup. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye. Go ahead.
That's so funny. So let's say that you were to talk about God because you had mentioned that you don't believe in some like patriarchal, like somebody up in the clouds. But the way I look at it is okay, so if God is a divine being, if I was to think about who that God is, right? If that God is love, if God is a divine being is all about love and created us out of love, then that God by default cannot be some patriarchal being like up there. Like it doesn't work. It's not the same God. So when I think about the God that I serve, that type of a relational God, it changes how we view things. It changes how you see how things are done. Because if the desire is for if there is this the holy God, but that loves us so much that changes how we even read things or process things, because that level of love, that's then the paradigm. That's the glasses we put on when we try to understand everything else. So if I'm reading something over here, if I'm witnessing a group of people do something and it's not in line with what I know of God, who calls us to love God, love neighbors above all else, and is a God of justice and a God of compassion, and those actions aren't lining up, I'm not letting that redefine my view of God. I might get frustrated with the system. You know, we're humans, we're not perfect. I might not like the way that you're running your institution, but what I know is I'm looking at what I'm viewing and learning through the lenses of what I believe I know about God, okay? And so then that changes things because while, yes, we can have God within us, we still have, in my opinion, there is a divine being and a spiritual realm,
Mhm.
and we're humans within that spiritual realm. But like when I think about a God of love, it changes things because that's the God who said, yeah, I will heal even though we're not supposed to heal on this day, because that person is more important than any rule. And then it just changes the way you start to think about things. And what's even wild about that is you could see hypocrisy and get frustrated with injustices or hypocrisy and look back and be like, God still has so much compassion for all of us. That's perfection. That's divine. That's something we can't aspire to because we're imperfect. I'll just like, get frustrated and so on and so forth. But that just helps me find peace in the midst of some chaos.
Yeah, I love that. I love and when I think about God, I think about God, like I said earlier, being everything. God is just love, and it's
Hmm.
literally just that simple. I think that we as humans oftentimes wanna overcomplicate this
Hmm.
idea of what God is. You said earlier of what you believe you know about God, but as you grow in your own space, in your own life, like, your awareness and your attachment, your relationship to God also grows.
Hmm.
So, the way that you feel now is probably not how you felt yesterday or 10 years ago. We just
Hmm.
keep growing and we keep learning more. But what
Hmm.
I've learned with myself is as I grow and I learn, it increases my capacity to love others.
Hmm.
And I don't even see the heretical acts of others. I don't really get frustrated by what others are
Hmm.
doing because what I know about my relationship with God and with source or the universe, whatever people wanna call
Hmm.
it, that person is just on their journey. Do I agree with it? No.
Hmm.
But I'm not gonna let it frustrate me. I'm not gonna get angry about it
Exactly.
because they're on their journey and
Hmm.
they're formulating their relationship with God, and hopefully they can get to a place where they're also at peace and also loving themselves and everyone in the universe and God as well.
But that's because you're doing a couple things. One, you're moving from a place of compassion. You are there was a second one I was gonna say. Oh, empathy. You're able to tap into that's a chapter I write about in my book, because if we could teach our young people to be empathetic, like, it's just make our world a better place. So you're engaging empathy. And then there was one more I was gonna say, but I can't remember what it was. But the reason that you're able to, like, view people, oh, because 'cause you're seeing their humanity. That
Mhm.
was the third one, right? I think if alone we can look at people and see their humanity, like, it changes the conversation completely. Speaking of being open to learning, I'll just mention this because you might really like this. There's a podcast episode I was listening to, and they were talking about how, for example, the Bible, for example, should start conversations, not end them.
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty mind-blowing because what that d is saying is if God created us out of love and he wants us to be in healthy community, then we should be able to come to the table and have healthy conversations. Have the humility enough to say, I don't know it all. I'm on this journey with you. I could tell you my story, my testimony, but like we I'm okay having these
Mhm.
conversations, and I want to hear what your thoughts on things and stuff like that too. Which is what's cool with the nature of your podcast is you're just like bringing people's stories, like wherever. What are you learning? What's your story? I like that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things and really why I got started. What really got me started, and I'm gonna have to do an episode, as we said earlier, about what got
Mhm,
me far.
mhm,
But I was actually having conversations with people, and people would just stop random people would just stop and listen to the conversations I was having.
mhm,
And I'm sure that's
mhm,
what led me to having that thought, as I always say, it was but a voice. But having that thought, or
mhm,
maybe I should really sit down and talk to more people officially and record it. But
mhm,
there's something I wanted to touch on, and oh, when we were talking about the Bible being
mhm,
it should be a way to open conversations and not end them. I think that all of religion and spiritual practices should be like, because far too often when you walk up to someone who's religious and you start trying to have these conversations, it's one of 2 things tends to happen. You have the non-religious individual who instantly feels shunned and shut down and feel as if they can't speak their own truth without being judged. And then you have the religious individual whom probably isn't trying to quote unquote convert, but can be a little bit overbearing sometimes with pushing their faith onto another person. And what I found is that when first you just have to get over those jitters. Unfortunately, our society, I don't think it's at a place yet to where we're not we just have to get over those jitters because if you wanna have the conversation, then have the conversation. I found that more people are open to having the talk than aren't.
mhm. Yeah, I feel you. And to be honest, I am a firm believer that even, one of my favorite verses in the Bible says, people will know me because of love, because of my love, not because of arguments on Twitter, not because of being able to defend something. Is literally strong but loving people. And that's exactly how Jesus led his life was like he cares about wholeness and shalom, right? Like it's not hence my whole aligned living is the pursuit of wholeness because if we just set out to care about people in their journey and because we all have needs and gaps and things that we're working through. And so if we just set out to help people meet those emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, social, economic needs, then if anything, that is something that is like reflective, I think, of whatever God you believe in, of his will in some way. Like you're showing up and caring for people holistically, because that's exactly what like Jesus did. That's what he cared about. Like whatever people believe about Jesus, that's not even the point. The point is people were being like healed or helped or cared for, or justice was being implemented, the poor were being cared for. It just is it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, one thing that really has opened my eyes is as I started to read about the different cultures and religions and theological practices, they all talk about the same thing. It's ultimately all about love and respect and honor. If you see someone that needs help, then help them if it's within your realm, the capacity to do. And you shouldn't be so concerned about the intricacies of ultimately a book, right? The dogmatic practices, and you have to go do this, and you have to, and I shouldn't say that. And you have to do certain things in order to reach God or to see God or to feel God. No, it's about love. It is about compassion. It is about empathy and helping others and your fellow man.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this last thought unless you have another question, but if Let's just say, hypothetically, if God created us out of love, I think about how I love my kids. I have 2 boys, 7 and 10. Jade and Jeremiah, amazing kids, and I love them with all my heart. I would do anything for them. My love is imperfect because 'cause I'm human. So if you have a divine being, God's love is that amazing. Like, I want my kids to want to spend time with me, and the only way for me to grow my relationship with my kids is to spend time with them. And so sometimes I think we overthink things as well because, like you said, practices, rules, institutions, there's nothing wrong with
Mm,
those things in and of itself. But if we acknowledge as step one that God wants us in relationship with Him and relationship with others, what is relationship? It's time. It's talking. It's just, okay, like I'm going through one of the most stressful seasons of my life. People are going to disappoint me, but God's not. You know what I'm saying? It's this divine love. Like, how can that? And so it's relational first, but we've lost that because we're in the busyness of task. We've lost the beauty of relationship with one another and with God. And I think that if we came back to that, like, really important, like, the thing, then I think a lot of things would start to shift.
for sure. Okay, so I do have one more question, then we'll end it.
Sure, 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 sure.
So, I guess it's more philosophical. What is love in your opinion?
This is a very interesting question because I actually recently did a really deep dive on this. So, okay, there's probably I'm gonna answer it today, and probably tomorrow I would have a slightly different answer, but today what I'm feeling is, okay, if God is love, okay, I think you have to go to that as origin because then you start looking at, like, what does that mean? It is implemented, it is such a deep care and connection with somebody that you show up in action, okay? Because and the reason I'm saying it like this is because I if you really love somebody, let's say, there is gonna be actions that follow. So, what I mean by that is, maybe for a good analogy is in the Bible, it does talk about if you have a relationship with God, if you're, like, growing spiritually in a healthy way, there's gonna be fruit of that, right? Like, it's simple, like, I love earth analogies, right? If you have a healthy tree, like, I don't have a green thumb, I tried to grow veggies and they weren't producing fruit, okay? My parents' garden did, right? Like, when you have healthy soil and nutrients, right, like, things produce fruit. I think if you really like, love to me has to be producing fruit. I think it would be hard to say, like, you love somebody and there's no, like, evidence or fruit of that. So, I know it's like, a little bit of a different answer because you can't say love's an emotion because emotions are just part of who we are, physical, mental, emotional, social, like, our thoughts are part of who we are. Like, thoughts are a big part of our personalities, the way we think, and emotions are just feelings attached to needs, met or unmet needs. So I think love engages all of us, physical, mental, spiritual, social, and so forth. So I wouldn't say that it's attached to specific emotions. I would say it's just this deep, intense care, so much so that actions follow. Care is not even the right word. I feel like I can't even think of the right word, but it's producing good fruit. And so you hit me with a hard one.
But then with that, would that just be like human love and then divine love would be not the need of having fruit produced?
No, no, because I think out of God sets the example for us, right? Because so for example, if we were created in his image, like we fall short of that, but we also have so much goodness in us, right? Like we have a lot of really wonderful, like good things in us, despite a lot of like hurt and struggle in the world. There's a lot of good there. And I feel like the same thing applies. Like if God has this love for us, but he's perfect. So it could be lived out perfectly. Like, we can have love for one another, but it's never gonna be lived out perfectly because we're not perfect, but good fruit could show up through that love. It could be selfless acts. I think a level of humility, a level of empathy, a level of just kindness and goodness and patience, and I think those are things that embody love,
Mm,
let's be honest.
I love that. I think that's why in ancient Greece, they had 5 different words for love. It wasn't just the romantic love, which is the agape.
Mhm,
Romantic is eros. There's also,
mhm.
like, agape, and I'm not gonna remember what the other 3 were. Just for thanks so much for continuing this conversation. It's been
Absolutely.
really great, honestly. Is there anything else before we go that you wanna leave?
Not really, but I'm looking forward to hearing more of your story.
Thank you so much for coming back on, and I don't know what I'm gonna do with this last little bit, but if you're still watching, thank you everybody for watching.
It was fun.
Thanks, bye.